Okay, thank you guys for coming back to the fourth class. Welcome to the final class for Global Millennial Model UN, MUN School, which we will talk about draft resolution for around 1 hour, and then we will see at an example of draft resolution. And I hope you guys can learn directly from looking at an example rather than just learning by the principles. Okay, I will start my share screen. Okay, wait. Okay, guys, so we will talk about drafting in Model UN. So one thing that you should know about drafting in Model UN is that it is going to be exactly the same way when you're drafting a real resolution in United Nations. The only difference is that there will be key differences in terms of how delegates interact with one another and also how resolution clauses are made. So in a real UN meeting, in a real UN setting, you will not directly among delegates, you will not directly meet each other and then drafting the clauses and per clauses, and then you will also not be doing all of that in a couple of hours, because in a real UN session, in a real UN conference, it will take a lot of time, and not directly the diplomats will be doing it. They will have secretaries doing it, and these guys will be held by the UN administration people, and then the draft resolution is most likely finished even before the debating almost finished as well. So in Model UN, you will be directly drafting all the clauses during the debating session. Okay, so it's going to be quite difficult because you have to focus on more than one activity at the same time. You have to draft, you have to type your clauses, but at the same time, you have to negotiate with other delegates, and also perhaps in some areas and in sometimes you also have to debate if you have different opinions with other delegates. So it's going to be hard, but we will start by looking at the principles first, and then we can talk about the example. Okay. So about drafting in Model UN, one thing that you should know is that in Model United Nations, they have three kinds of documents. The first one is the one that we have already learned in the third class, which is position paper. Okay. Position paper happens before the conference. It is made before the conference and it will not be debated. Okay. We will not be debating about position papers in a Model UN conference because a position paper is submitted before a conference starts. And then the ones who will be reading your position paper and also other delegates' position papers will only be the board of dais. Okay. They will decide which position paper is the best, and they will also determine whether you're performing based on your position paper because your country stance and also your country's policies as well as your proposed solutions will be based on your position paper, and they will see whether or not you are staying on the right track of your country stance. Okay, so that's position paper. The second one is working paper. Working paper is also a draft document that you need to make during the conference. But the only difference is that working paper, perhaps we can call it pre-draft resolutions, because working papers are made before a draft resolution is made. What will be the difference between working paper and draft resolution? Perhaps some of you may have understood that draft resolutions are made at the last time of the conference, and it will be debated also in the last sessions of the conference. But for working paper, it can happen immediately after the first session is finished. You can start making your working paper, and you do not have to make a block for a working paper to be made. You can make it by yourself. You can make it only by two delegates, or perhaps you want to just portray exactly what you're trying to say through a position paper using any format that you think is the most suitable. I have been in an MUN where the working paper is not actually a paper, but rather a presentation document. I have also been in an MUN where the delegates are representing their ideas through working papers, but not in a form of paper, but in a form of infographics. It is also possible. So there will be no fixed formats for working papers. But as for draft resolution, there will be formats that you have to follow. So you cannot imagine yourself making anything related draft resolution in any format that you like, because a draft resolution has a fixed format that is obligatory for you to follow. Okay. For draft resolutions, this will be the last document that you need to make in an MUN conference. And this will not be a document that you make by yourself, but instead you will make your draft resolution with your block or with your teams. Okay. There will be sponsors and there will be signatories. The difference is that sponsors are the one leading the drafting process of the document, while signatories may not always lead the drafting process, but they become a complementary part for the drafting process. Okay, so that will be the three documents that you will find in an MUN conference. Okay, we will move on to the next slide. Okay, so working paper. What is working paper? So working paper is actually, as I have mentioned before, perhaps I would say a paper that you need to make before a draft resolution is made, because if you put it in a timeline, it comes position paper first at the beginning, working paper in the middle, and then draft resolution at the last. What what is included in working paper? The first one is that you have to include your solutions, either your blog solution, proposed solutions, or perhaps your personal opinion about your proposed solutions as a country, but in a very brief way. So you will not find a working paper that consists of 10 or 15 pages, because that will be perceived as a draft resolution. Okay. So sometimes working paper is only 1 to 3 pages, not too much, because we don't have much time to present a working paper, since there will be only perhaps one session dedicated for delegates to represent their ideas through working paper. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is that there is no exact format and structure. This is what I've mentioned previously. No format means you do not have to stick with a document, a Word or a Google Docs document. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be in a form of presentation. It can be in a form of infographics. It can be in a form of poster, probably. What matters is that you portray your opinions that would be a base for your draft resolution. Okay, and there will be no structure as well, not a fixed structure, so you can present your ideas and opinions in a way that you feel the most suitable. The third way of drafting a working paper is that you don't need to present it, just discuss it later on a formal debate. However, there will be some MUN conferences in which the chairs in a certain session or council decide to have a presentation of working paper. But it does not immediately mean that you have to present it, because sometimes working papers can be in any number. There can be 3, 4 working papers in a different in different blocks. Sometimes they have 5, they have 6. Perhaps there will be only 3 working papers dedicated to by the chairs to be presented. But yes, it does not mean that you have to present it. But there will be times where you are told by the chairs to present it. Okay, so that's working paper. Okay, perhaps we can see at an example of a working paper. I will present my working paper in an MUN that I have been a participant of. Okay, wait. Perhaps while we're waiting and while we're waiting for me searching the file, perhaps any of you want to ask a question, feel free to send a Zoom box chat or just unmute your mic while I'm finding my working paper. Okay, this one I've already found. Okay. Okay, so this is an example of a working paper. So I was in Asian Law Students Association, or ALSA, Model UN English Challenge back in 2019. And I was a delegate in a UN legal committee, or the 6th Committee of General Assembly, in which I represented the country of Pakistan. So I was the delegate of Pakistan. The issue was terrorism. As a country that is quite famous for not handling terrorism quite well, for some people, I have to present my position as Pakistan in a way that I'm not endorsing terrorism, but also at the same time, I'm not denying the fact that terrorism is an issue in my country. So this is my working paper with my team. The one that I did with this working paper is that I use a structure of bullet points, and my team and I were trying to highlight the main discussions of the current session. So here I talk about the current solution that are being proposed, and also the main aspects that we need to provide explanation of, and also differentiation between terrorist attack and armed attack. So one of the requirements of the study guide is that we have to discuss whether a terrorist attack is also categorized as an armed attack. So this is my team's opinion on that, and we use some references from, for example, in ICJ case of Nicaragua back in 2001, which defines what an armed attack is, and then we try to provide a definition that is perhaps visible for terrorism to be put in a formal draft of a legal document. And then this is how my working paper was structured. So no fixed format, no fixed structure. You can use bullet points. You can use a narration in a form of paragraphs. You want to make a presentation, perhaps that's also okay. Oh, talking about presentation, I think I have an example for that, since I just remembered that I have a working paper based in a form of presentation. Okay, I'm still looking for it. You guys can perhaps I want to ask a question. Okay, where is it? Okay, this one. Okay, so this is my working paper when I was participating in Singapore Model UN back in 2018, which is 3 years ago. Oh my gosh, long time ago. Okay, so back to the main topic. So this was about the status of forces agreements. So in Singapore MUN 2018, I was again in the UN Legal Committee, and we talked about the topic of peacekeeping officers. And then we were discussing about the working paper that is currently being debated at the time, that was currently being debated. And then as a country, I was Germany back then, and I wanted to reform some legal basis and also legal references that all delegates can use in order to have a revamped or a revised, somehow perhaps you can say revised, a revision towards what the current solutions cannot do. So my team and I highlighted that there is a lack of enforcement within the current status of forces agreements, or SOFAs. So we see that peacekeeping operations are legally based between coordinated consensus between troop contributing countries, or TCCs, host nations, and the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations, or UNDPKO, through SOFAs. So a lot of acronyms back here. Okay, so I want to try to explain this in the best way that I could. So for a peacekeeping operation to be conducted, there has to be status of forces agreement. So this is SOFA's, a type of agreement for an operation for peacekeeping to be conducted. There has to be certain parties involved in the agreement, which are TCCs, through contributing countries, host nations, or HMs, and then the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations. However, the deficiency of TCCs as troops provider in establishing concurrence of the legal mechanism on prosecuting possible allegations conducted by the peacekeepers is something that has to be resolved. So my team and I discussed this, and we think that our position paper had to include this, and it had to be the center of attention during the discussion, during the debate, because we believe that it was not the center of the discussion. And through position paper, we wanted to make sure that it became a center of attention. So that's a brief way of you to for you to make a position paper, a working paper, sorry. So it can be in the form of PowerPoint as well. Okay, so those are the example of working paper. We will go back to the presentation regarding working paper. So we already learned that in a working paper, they have no fixed structure or formats, right? And then after you learn about the structure or examples of working paper, I will be presenting about the do's and don'ts in drafting working papers. So for working paper, you can see here in the do's part, even though you can submit it by yourself, you better have a block with you. So this is a recommendation in which I also have agreements with. Instead of just showcasing yourself as a one-man show, you can try attracting other delegates through making working papers. It shows that you are showing a teamwork. You're showing to other delegates that you are an open delegate, an open country that is open for any critics, any suggestions, any ideas. And through working paper, it also makes you easier to find future block members inside of your block. So I will be very, very highly encouraging all of you to make a working paper with other delegates. Okay. The other do's that you have to remember is that for you to highlight some important point of your block solutions, remember to always highlight the only important ones, because as the working paper session is not always long enough for you to present all ideas, you just have to present the most important ones. Okay. Those are the do's. So what are the don'ts? The don'ts are don't have too much details. If you see at the previous examples, there were only 3 pages, 2 pages, and 3 slides or 2 slides of presentation. So it does not have to be too long since it's only a working paper, okay? Remember that it is a working paper. It's not done yet. It's still being worked by the other delegates. So you don't have to rush. You don't have to cover all the things. Just cover the things that are already discussed inside the committee. Okay. Some chairs will probably be very cautious when it comes to working papers that cover ideas that should be debated later on after the future sessions. But some blocks already made a working paper that already cover ideas that shouldn't be discussed at that time, and chairs will be noticing that, and it will be a negative point for you to do that. So I would suggest not to cover all ideas. Okay. Okay, already in DR format. So this is also a don't. Some working paper is already in the draft resolution format. why would why would chairs be super cautious with this? I would say because if it is already in a DR format, then the chairs would be suspicious, as if whether you were making a working paper or you were just trying to slide in your draft resolution before the conference in a form of working paper, which is, I wouldn't say it is a bad thing, because perhaps some of you might have a trouble time learning and you want to use such strategy for you to learn. But I would suggest not to do that, because in a real UN conference, there is no way a country can just slide in their version of working paper or draft resolution while others haven't even debated on it. Okay. So for you to gather confidence, and I think most importantly, for you to show honesty, it's better for you to not have any kind of pre-document, either working paper or draft resolution or anything, because that would not show your competency as a skilled delegate. I would say for you to be in the situation where you are drafting all of the documents during the whole process without having any kind of pre-documents, even though you still can have references printed. For example, you want to print the UN charter in order for you to draft a working paper, it's fine. But for you to have a pre-document that's already finished, I wouldn't suggest that. And definitely the Global Millennial Model UN Committee will not suggest you to do that, since they're putting this in their don'ts. Okay, so that will be the do's and don'ts for working paper. Next one is draft resolution. Yay, we finally come into the draft resolution part. Okay, I'm moving myself over here. Okay, so for draft resolution, the output of your conference for around 2 days or 3 days, you're gonna have to write a resolution. The name draft resolution means that it is still a draft, but when it is voted, and if it passes, it becomes a resolution. So you will hear UNSC resolution number something in a year of something. You will see UN General Assembly resolution number something in a certain year. So resolution means it is a collective opinion, a collective ideas that all delegates that that are present or present in voting decide to have as a key indicator of how action should be done. For example, a resolution of General Assembly in regards to how we collaborate internationally. Then for future references, any kind of international collaboration within the UN system has to take a look first at these UN General Assembly resolution, because it will be in a form of guidance. Some of you might ask whether a resolution is the same as a treaty or as an international agreement? My answer would be no, since resolution is not legally binding. The only legally binding document in the UN system is the resolution passed by the UN Security Council, because it is stated in UN Charter saying that for a UNSC to perform in their way in regards to protecting international peace and also security, there has to be a legally binding document in which every delegate, whether they like it or not, has to be in compliance with that resolution. I know it's hard to understand, but remember that resolution, the one that is legally binding means that even if you don't like it, some countries can force you to obey what's inside the resolution. So legally binding document in the UN system is the resolution by the UN Security Council or UNSC, but not in other UN councils or committees. Okay, so that's for draft resolution. Quick explanation for draft resolution. Third thing that you have to know is that there is an exact format. There actually is some forms, some structures that you have to follow. And compared to working papers who do not have any kind of such format, draft resolution has a very strict format that if you get it wrong, the chairs wouldn't be quite pleased with your process and with your progress. So I would say for you to stick with what the UN actually requires you to do so. Okay, again, if anyone has a question, just cut me during my talk, unmute your mic, and I will be super happy to answer your question. Okay, so we will move on to structure of draft resolutions. So structure for draft resolution, there are two types. The first one is heading. The first type of structure is heading. This is the logo of your council or the UN logo. And there will be DR numbers and also the list of sponsor and signatories. So what is DR number? DR number is in a situation where draft resolution in one council, they have more than one draft resolutions, then the chairs will have to give a number for draft resolution for them to easily identify which draft resolution is which. So for example, they have DR 1.1 and also DR 1.2, then that will be the DR number. That's for heading. List of sponsor and signatories, meaning it is the list of countries who are in a block. For example, if you are if you want to be if you want to be in block A, then you're gonna ask the team, your block, as whether you're the sponsor or not. For example, you're asking, yeah, we have to make a list of sponsors. Who do you think should be the sponsor of our DR? It's just asking. So if for example, in a certain situation, some delegates answer, oh, I think you should be the one who is the sponsor of the DR. And then as a delegate, you have to say, yes, there's no way you're rejecting a sponsor opportunity. So you have to say, okay, I can be a sponsor. But if you're in a situation where the delegates are not actually endorsing you as a sponsor, then you have to fight for it. Okay, why would that be the reason? I'm not saying that you have to be a sponsor to win, because there has been a time where signatories actually win awards in Model UN. Okay, so this is for the case of you who are searching for awards, right? For those of you who are searching for just having a good time, you can just do it in any way you want that you like the most. So, but if you want to be seen by the chair, to be, to have any eligible opportunities for an award, I would say always fight for the sponsor position. Okay, because it shows your leadership, it shows your commitment during the whole drafting process, and it'll be a very good plus point for you. That's for heading, guys. So for body, they have two formats of clauses. The first one is preambulatory clauses. Second one is operative. Preambulatory means these are the clauses that do not include any operative or concrete actions on what to do, but rather it provides principles, it provides fundamental key ideas, and also fundamental basis or legal basis in which the delegates have to be in accordance with. And the clauses they have to be in accordance with these clauses. So for example, the case of environmental protection, you can put Rio Declaration at the preambulatory clauses, or perhaps you want to list past UN General Assembly resolutions that talk about environmental protection in an international setting, you can also put that in your preambulatory clauses. Aside from documents, aside from legal documents, you can also put a principle in a preambulatory clauses. For example, you want to say, knowing that environmental protection is something that all countries have to do, there has to be certain actions that all countries are committed to do. So you can also put some sort of clauses like that. So it can be documents, it can be principles, but I would suggest to have both types of clauses of the preambulatory part for you to put in the draft resolution. Okay, for operative means that these are the actions that you have to do. Previously, I mentioned that environmental protection is obligatory for all countries. That will be the preambulatory part. For the operative part, you can put all the actions of the solutions that you have debated during the sessions of the MUN. Okay, so that's for structure.
Victor,
Okay, yeah, sure.
I I still confused about the preambulatory. Can you explain that once again to us?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much,
You
Samantha, for the question. So, in regards to draft resolution, perhaps I want to put an example first. Okay, wait. Okay, so this is an example of a draft resolution for the preamble letter and also the operative clauses. So for this one, for example, this is again from Singapore MUN 2018, my blog's draft resolution. So this is an example of preambulatory clauses. For example, the first clause, guided by the Charter of the UN. This one, the one that I'm bolding, guided by the Charter of the UN, particularly Article 1, which states that the purposes of the UN is to achieve international peace and security. So the topic of the debate was about addressing the criminality of UN workers, right? So we're trying to debate whether or not UN workers can be sued or can be criminally charged. So this is what we're trying to do. We already know that criminality of UN workers is about trying to hold someone accountable, right? It does not mean that if you're a UN officer that you are exempt or you cannot be criminally charged. So we're trying to debate on that, and we think that Article 1 of the UN Charter is very very suitable to be put in the preambulatory part. So what we did was we want to put this at the top of the preambulatory clauses. The next clause is we want to recall a certain document. And then we found out that, oh, there's this convention that talks about diplomatic relations, which is the 1961 Vienna Convention of Diplomatic Relations. And apart from that, we also found out about the report of a Secretary General back in 2017 regarding accountability of UN officers and officials and experts. These are the example of preambulatory clauses in a form of documents, referring to old documents or past documents. But for preambulatory clauses to be only in principle format, you can see at this one, reaffirming the need to promote and ensure respect for the principles and rules of international law. So this is one type example of a preambulatory clause that only consists of principles. If you take a look at the clause, there is no document or there is no certain reports or conventions that are being referred to. So we were just referring to a principle that we believe is something that the United Nations has to have in their UN system. So these are the preambulatory clauses. What are the rules? What are the purposes? The purpose is that you put preambulatory clauses for the readers to know the fence and also the corridors on what kind of actions that can be proposed, because you cannot just put any kind of solution, right? You have to put solutions that are within the corridor of the law, within the corridor of international principles that are believed by many countries. And this is the type of preambulatory clauses that you have to make. For operative clauses is more concrete. It's the solution, right? So for this preambulatory clauses, these are not the solutions because you're not trying to solve an issue with a principle, right? Because a principle is just a principle. it has to be in form of concrete ideas and activities. So this is the example of operative clause. This is operative clause number 1. It says again about SOFA's status of forces agreements. In this part, my team and I wanted to have an independent, special, and purpose-built prosecuting mechanism that functions as an alternative toward the unwillingness to prosecute alleged UN peacekeepers. So the situation is like this. During this time, we did not see any kind of mechanism in which it can be applied if no one is prosecuting a UN peacekeeping officer. So what we did was that we want to have an independent or special or purpose-built mechanism that is dedicated to settle such issue. So this is the solution, right? There is no principle, there is no nothing, but this is the key action that we want to do after we pass a draft resolution. However, operative clause like this has to be based on the preambulatory clause. So it cannot violate any kind of principles that are included in the preambulatory clause. So those are examples of operative and also preambulatory clauses. I hope you guys understand. And thank you, Samantha, for the question. So we will move on to the next part of the slide, which is about, okay, I forgot what was the next part. Okay, so we will talk about, okay, we already talked about this. Structure is already done. Okay, I think it's this one. Okay, sponsors and signatories. Okay, we already covered a little bit, but I will cover a lot. Okay, so I will put myself in front of the sponsors and signatories word. I hope it does not distract you. So for sponsors, the countries that outed or dominantly build the DR. So I've previously mentioned is that a sponsor is the one leading. That's it. It's the one leading, whether you are being dominant or whether you're not being dominant. As long as you're leading the drafting process, you can be eligible to be appointed as sponsor. Why did I use the word eligible? Because it does not necessarily mean that you will be a sponsor if you're putting a lot of contributive inputs towards the drafting process. At the end of the day, it has to be an agreement between your block to choose which delegates can be a sponsor. So sometimes there can be delegates who perhaps did not contribute much, but they were selected anyway because he or she is fun or he or she is humorous. There were situations like that, but necessarily, and also I believe usually it is very often that you are chosen based on your objective contribution in the drafting process. So don't worry and try to lead and also try to make your blog as cooperative as possible when it comes to drafting process. Okay. Maximum sponsor, it is decided by chair. In the last class, we learned that there is a formula to determine how many numbers of sponsors, but at the end of the day, it depends on the chair's discretion. So you have to ask, what is the maximum number of sponsors? The third one is that a country cannot become a sponsor in 2DR. Yes, you cannot become a sponsor in two draft resolutions because that would be useless. Why would you be a sponsor in two different DRs where you can just represent one DR? That's for sponsor. Signatories means that your countries support the draft resolution, but you're not the one leading. So you're just signing and you're becoming a signatory because you believe that what is included in the draft resolution also represents what your country stands and policies. A country can become signatories in multiple DRs. So the only difference with sponsor is that signatories can be in more than two draft resolutions, more than one draft resolution. So you can be a signatory in DR 1.1, you can be a signatory in DR 1.2, but for sponsors, you can only be in one draft resolution. So don't feel like your victory is secured enough just because you have a big block, because sometimes those signatories during the voting process, they may not be defending you as in a way that they're actually voting for the other side. So always be cautious because it contributes into your scoring points if you are looking for awards. Okay, so this is the preamble. We already see the example for that. but what you have to know is that it is the opening. It is most likely in verbing. Well, it can be in verbing in other parts, but most likely it will be in verbing or gerund. And the last one is that it consists the background and legal basis of your solution or issue. Why do you have to have a preambulatory clause? Why don't we just put operative clauses in a draft solution? The reasons for that are because you cannot put a solution that is not within the UN principles or the UN fundamental ideas or the UN fundamental takeaways, which means that you have to put a solution that is based on what is believed inside the UN system. You cannot just put any kind of solution. For example, you want to end poverty, and your solution is to kill half of the universe, just like what Thanos did. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. And what you have to do is that you have to look at the principles of the UN, what principles that the UN believes in. You have to look at that and then try to make a solution based on that. Okay, that's for preambulatory clauses. Oh, it's a lot. Okay, so okay, I'm putting myself over here. Okay, so these are the examples of preambulatory phrases. So if you take a look at the previous example of document of DR document, you can see that there are some words in front of it, right? And it is italicized, and then you can see that there are some words that you can use. You can use contemplating or emphasizing or keeping in mind. These depend on what kind of notion that you were trying to portray to draft a certain preambulatory clauses. Okay, you want to screenshot this? Feel free to do it, but I will share the presentation anyway after this, so you can just take a look at perhaps some words that you feel like you like the most. Okay, so that's for preambulatory clauses. The next one is that we will talk about operative clauses. I'm gonna move myself over here. Okay, so what are the main purpose of operative clauses? It is to present, again, concrete actions that you want to propose. So this is the accumulation of what has been debated during the whole conference. It has to be in a form of proposal of certain solutions, and the way for you to market your solutions is by drafting operative clauses, right? Because you have to conclude all things that you debated during the conference in a form of clause, which is operative clause, and then you have to present your main essence. So what are the key differences that your DR has compared to other DRs? You have to have that in your draft resolution, and most likely it will be in a verb base, in a verb one form. So it's more of recommending a certain committee to do something, or perhaps endorsing a certain action to happen after the resolution passes. Those will be the kind of aspects that you will find in operative clauses. The third one is to express an idea or ideas of your resolution. It has to present the exact notion or the exact principle that you are trying to endorse, that you're trying to portray in front of other delegates. And it's very important for you to have that. Okay, so this is the sample of operative phrases. Okay, I'm putting myself over here. Okay, so there's a lot, right? You have accept, you have what expresses its appreciation and all that. Remember that it is in the form of verb one plus s. Okay, what would that be the reason? The reason for that is because this is as if a document we're trying to recommend something. So UN General Assembly recommends this, UN General Assembly recommends that. So it is a one integrated part of a document. It all represents the opinion of all the drafters, right? So that's for operative phrases. We still have 15 minutes. I hope we can make it on time since we don't have much time again. Okay, so this is the draft resolution process, the mechanism. I will put myself over here. Okay, so before it is adopted in a voting process, you have to debate it first, right? But for you to debate that, you have to know that you can only debate the yes, if anyone wants to ask something. Okay, I think someone, okay, Nur, you want to ask something? Okay, I think Nur forgets to unmute. So, okay. Okay, so for draft resolution, you have to present it first. But for you to present it, you have to introduce a motion, which is the introduction of your draft resolution. Who will be representing the draft resolution? Definitely the sponsors. Okay, but sometimes it's not all the sponsors. Sometimes chairs decide to have like only one or perhaps two out of four out of five. So you have to fight twice. You have to fight as a sponsor, and you have to fight as the representing or the presenting sponsor. Okay, remember this. In draft resolution process, in drafting the resolution, in all of its process, you have to fight for two things. First, you have to fight for the sponsor position. Secondly, you have to fight to be the presenting sponsor position. So I would suggest that because it guarantees victory in MUN. Usually, the presentation is only 10 minutes, perhaps 15, and based on the chair's discretion. This is the time where you take other block delegates' hearts. Why would why would that be the reason? The reason for that is because there are swing delegates, guys. Swing delegates are delegates who still do not know where their position is. They still feel that, oh, I think I can be here in block A. But at the same time, they're also thinking, I think I can be here in block B too. So he or she decided to become signatories in both DRs. And what you have to do in a presentation of DR is to fight for their opinions and try to attract and persuade them to vote for your DR afterwards. Okay, so those are some strategies that you can use. The second part is for you to discussing it in a moderated caucus or perhaps to criticize each other's DR. There will be sessions where you can criticize one another, which is fun because that's the final part of MUN sessions and you have to be there as a leading delegate. The last one is voting process. Voting process, there will be no debating sessions again. There will only be voting process. Again, remember, it is a quorum vote. It's a two-third decision by all the delegates that are present and or present and voting. And you have to vote if you are present and voting. You can be abstained if you are only present. Okay, so this is the mechanism of draft resolution that you have to bear in mind because it matters a lot, especially if you're a sponsor. You have to know all the technical information. You have to know all the technical procedures for you to strategically secure a victory in passing a draft resolution. Some of you might ask, what happens if a draft resolution does not pass? Well, it won't be passing if it does not pass. It's simple. But if you can pass a draft resolution, meaning that you can secure a huge number of support from a lot of other delegates, that will be a huge point, and I believe you will become the best delegate if you can do that during the whole process of the drafting of the resolution. Okay, but it does not always have to be like that, guys. I have been I'll say I've been blessed enough to have an opportunity to win a best delegate award while I'm not the majority block, while I'm not passing a delegate, and while I'm not, you know, managing myself to secure a lot of voices. So it's super possible. Chairs have a lot of considerations to determine who is the best delegate. You don't really have to be the one leading, or you really don't have to be the one presenting, or you really do not have to be the one who is passing a draft resolution. It is not something that is fixed for chairs. However, if you can do all of that, there is a higher probability for you to win awards. So I would say for you to do all of these suggestions that I just mentioned to you earlier and make it as a consideration for you to perhaps take a further step forward in doing or participating in an MUN. Okay, that will be some tips. Okay, so this is the last one. These are the awards. Oh, okay. I didn't expect that there will be a slide on this. Okay, so there will be 5 awards, right? I'm gonna make myself super big on this one. So the first one is best delegate. Best delegate is the best delegate. This is the number one, as if this delegate performs super well. He or she passes the resolution. He or she leads the drafting of the resolution. He or she talks a lot. He or she presents very persuading ideas that are very feasible to happen and also to combat the issue. However, it does not always have to be like that. There are some delegates who actually won best delegate without doing all of that. Perhaps the chairs have certain consideration on that, but usually in any MUN, the chairs will look for the ones that I just mentioned, for the factors that I just mentioned. Okay, most outstanding is the second place or the runner up. Honorable mention is the third place. Verbal accommodation is the fourth place. The case for a certain MUN is that there can be two forms of awards in each category. For example, I've been in an MUN where there are three verbal accommodations. I've also been in an MUN where there are two honorable mentions. Okay. But for best delegate, usually it's only one because we're just looking for the best. The last one is best position paper. So this is only dedicated for those who actually crafted a very good best position paper. Remember that position paper is a pre-conference document. It is submitted before a conference even starts, so your scoring calculation will be based on your position paper. However, there are some chairs who actually want to see whether your position paper is in line with your performance, because there has been a situation where delegates a delegate's position paper is really really good, really really informative, really really structured, but his or her performance is not as good as the position paper is. So the chairs decide not to give this delegate the best position paper award. There are some chairs who actually see such consideration in handing a best position paper award. Myself personally, I would say yes, both factors actually contribute, because we want to see whether you're actually making the position paper or whether someone's making it for you. I don't know, but we will definitely see your performance. However, there has been cases where certain chairs want to see only from your paper only and not from your performance in an integrated scoring calculation. So you have to ask the committee perhaps to see whether your chairs actually prefer certain calculation criteria. Okay, so that's for the last part. Okay, 5 minutes left, guys. Okay, okay, I am putting myself over here since you cannot see the quote. Okay, so this is the quote that you often see in any slide from the previous four classes. Well, you don't have to be great to start, because not everyone is great to start, right? Everyone has their own timeline, everyone has their own future, everyone has their own situation. We cannot put the same situation, we cannot put the same criteria in everyone, since everyone is living their different lives. Perhaps if you see someone who just happens to be really good, their English is really good, they can pronounce things easily, they can speak to native speakers in a very very fluent way. Probably because the reasons are they were born in situations where their parents can actually help them grow. But there were also some people who actually not as blessed as these people are. So you don't have to be great to start. However, you have to start to be great, because if you never start, then how come would you even be great? Okay. This is a quote that I personally really love. This is from the committee, by the way, but I really love the quote. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So, for all the MUN classes, the previous four classes, I thank you so much for your participation. I hope it helps all of you in order for you to excel in Model UN, or perhaps you want to use all of these insights in a different competition type. For example, you want to participate in a debating competition, or perhaps in a speech competition, or perhaps in a moot court competition. I would say all of these skills are transferable, and you can apply the same insights, the same principles in certain competition types. And I believe that if you start, then you'll be great, just like what the quote says in my back. Okay. Anyone, if you want to ask a question, since this is our last meeting and will be my last time helping you guys also in the mentorship in the MUN school. Anyone who wants to ask a question, you can just unmute yourself or send a Zoom box chat. It's also super fine. We have 4 minutes left. Okay, anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, if no one wants to ask a question, I'm gonna let you guys know that I will be still open for any question even after the MUN school elapses or finishes. You have my WhatsApp number on the group. I will say on the group as well if the committee decides not to remove everyone from the group. And if you want to ask a question or even you want to perhaps you want your papers to be reviewed by me, or you have perhaps any other assignments that you want to review, you want me to review, feel free to do it. I'm super open for it, and it will be an honor for me to get to know all of you guys. Okay. I hope you guys have a great time. It's already 1 hour. And again, if anyone wants to ask a question, you can personally chat me or or just collectively chat me on the group. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. I will see you perhaps in future opportunities. I hope the ones who are present here and the ones who are not present and in my class will be a successful people, will be a successful person, and I hope we can meet each other perhaps in offline setting. That will be better, and we can talk about life after that. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you in more opportunities in the future. Thank you. Makasih semuanya.
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much,
Mr.
Mr.
Thank you
Sama-sama.
so much, Mister.
Makasih ya.
Uh,
Yuk.